Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the third monthly meeting of our new UK Association of Trail Associations, Informal Trail Groups and Bike Parks, the UK MTB Trail Alliance. So this one's going to be a little different. Normally, it's hard to find a speaker or a topic that's relevant to all of our 125 member groups. So there's a lot of shared problems and issues. There's also a lot of variation, from informal trail groups to some illegal trails they've built in their local woods, through to well-established and formal trail associations looking after official trails, from the big commercial bike parks with a lot of trails and even more elevation, through to community-run bike parks with a few jumps on a trail around the edge on a flat piece of land. But tonight we've got a speaker who's relevant to everyone. If you're on the call, I'll assume you know some of the background, but it does bear repeating. Developing Mountain Biking in Scotland, DIMBINs for short, have been working away over the last couple of years to secure a big enough financial commitment from SRAM to fund a 3-year project run by a full-time project manager, the goal of which is to work with the mountain bike community, the national governing bodies, so British Cycling, Welsh Cycling, Scottish Cycling, and the big national landowners to improve the sustainability of the mountain bike network across the whole of the UK. Those of you that know what a difference DIMBINs has made to mountain biking in Scotland over the last 12 to 14 years or so will be as excited as I am about what this project might bring. And hopefully we'll all get a better feel for that this evening. So yes, tonight we're lucky to have the UK Trails project manager, Dave Evans, presenting, who I'll hand over to in a second. He'll talk for about 15 minutes before he then has some questions for us. So that's exciting. And after that, we'll open up the floor for you all to ask questions of him. If you could use the little hands up icon at the bottom of the screen so I know you want to speak, that would be great. And I'll call people in turn. When asking your questions, please say who you are and which group you're from. After you've warned Dave out with questions, Zoe Woodman from Girls Alive is going to ask us all a small favour, and then I'll open things up so you can all ask questions of each other and of me and what we're doing centrally to build the UK MTB Trail Alliance. So this is a new one on this call, but if you could, I could ask if you could all leave your video on, so everyone can see each other. That'd be really cool. Although please stay on mute unless you're speaking. And also please change your display name to include the organisation you represent. So for example, you can see mine is Robin Grant, UK MTB Trail Alliance. This is only our third meeting and the third time I've used Zoom to run a meeting like this, so please bear with us. Having said that, over to you, Dave.
Right. Thank you very much to Robin for inviting me to talk to you all this evening. I have been invited initially before Christmas, but having only started in the post in November, I felt I wanted to get my feet under the table and see what was going on and what was being asked and being asked for around the country before I stood up in front of everybody and said what it is we're trying to do. So I'll share my screen. I will then be able to tell you a little bit about my background, where I've come from, how I've come to here, what the UK Trails project is about, what it is we are looking into, and how we're doing that initially. And then I can give you a little insight into themes that have started to emerge from discussions that have been had so far on the project. And then we can go to the floor to hear a little bit more from the room as to how we can look to move things forwards. I'm not going to be able to sort of speak to everybody about everybody's project tonight, as much as I'd absolutely love to, but I will be popping my email address up showing where I've been looking to reach out to people who've been involved with trail management, be it formally, be it informally, as part of the case studies which are coming up as part of the project, and we can arrange to have some one-to-ones in the future. So let's pop the slides onto the screen and Robin, can you just give me a nod if you can see that okay?
Yeah, that's working.
That's okay, fantastic. So the UK Trails project is going to be, let's move you across there. This is the first time I've given this presentation to a virtual audience, so again, please bear with me a little bit as we get these slides up and running. So I've told you a little bit about where the project starts, and I'll tell you a little bit about who I am and how it all fits together. So I'm from the middle of Wales originally. Spent 30 years riding bikes, and the last 10 years I've been building some trails, both formally and informally, and been looking after trails as part of the Zoe Mountain Biking Community Interest Company, which is responsible for the climax trails in the Zoe area, the MAC trails, and is looking and has been working with NRW to maintain a variety of off-piste trails in the area as well. My first career was in environmental monitoring through the degree route, and that mostly involved putting weather stations in awkward places, usually to gather data for renewable power development. And I also spent a winter in Antarctica with bass, so yeah, it feels a bit familiar outside at the moment. So 8 years ago, I quit doing that, ironically, because it involved too much driving up and down to Scotland, and I had a young family, and I started out a little business called Bike Chorus. That was initially a guiding business, so that meant getting out on the bike on the weekends and seeing what it was that people thought of the trails we had in Chorus. And I quickly became asked to have an input in other trail developments that were going along because of my experience of doing non-forestry work in a forest. So Bike Chorus sort of evolved at that point and helped out with the development of Dovey Bike Park and other trails on other people's land. And around 3 years ago, I started a large 2-year contract surveying and risk assessing trails for NRW across the Welsh estate. So that led to sort of my interest in how trails can be managed and made sustainable for the future of communities by bringing together what I've done with the community company in Dovey and the work I've done elsewhere. So about the project, as Robin said earlier, the UK Trails Project does indeed cover the whole of the country, all 4 nations, and it's being hosted by Developing Mountain Biking in Scotland. The reason for this was SRAM was indeed looking to drop some money into the UK to do a project of further mountain biking in the whole country, rather than just doing a sort of showcase project. And I think this is to be applauded because it's quite easy-ish to do a showcase project and get all the likes, but to get things moving behind the scenes to move the whole of the sport forwards, it takes quite a lot of hard work, as many people here who've been involved in the community sector will be only too aware. So fair play to SRAM for coughing up and funding a project that would hopefully be able to help across the board. So why am I a Welshman sitting here in a Scottish jumper talking to people all across the UK? Well, SRAM wanted to work with British Cycling. British Cycling at the time said, we don't have the capacity and the knowledge for that, so why don't you pop up the road, speak to Scottish Cycling and DBMS. And my boss, Graham, spoke at length to SRAM and put together this project. So when I saw the project, the work being advertised, I thought, this will be great. I'll nip up to Innerleithen, get their documents, jump in my car, drive around the country, and bish bash bosh, we'll have trail associations everywhere. However, I was quickly told by the project board, who are the cycling governing bodies from around the home nations, and the majority public sector landowners from around the home nations, that's not going to be the way we're going to do things. And the reason for that is there's more than one way to skin a cat. A trail association can work very well in the right place with the right people, but it may not be the right answer for everything. So the first task for the project is to step back a little bit and look at what we have in the UK at the moment. So that part of the project, phase 1, is called the Right Trail, Right Place, Right Time and Right People report. So what we're looking at here is a listening phase. So we're looking at what we have across the UK in terms of trails sorted by postcode. So there has been some concern, and quite rightly concern, about thinking this project's going to divulge where all the secret trails are across the UK, but we're not really looking to do that. We're looking very much at a polygon level. So tell me about your postcode, tell me about what's going on in your area, rather than the line and the dot on the specifics. And by casting an online survey out across the UK, which will be coming shortly into the start of February, we're hoping to gather a sweep of the country and see what we've got and where across the UK, and also look at some of the management techniques in that, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So once we've got all this information together, we're going to put this together in the right report, and that will be issued in the end of summer next year, and we'll be able to summarise and catalogue what the makeup of the riding scene is in the UK, how we are managing that at the moment, informally, formally, with case studies of different examples, with different management methods, with different landowner types. And then we'll look into phase 2 about what we're doing well and what are our shared goals between the land managers and the mountain bike community, and see what we can link up for finding pathways through where mountain bikers may be seeing things such as a barrier to progress. But by speaking to the landowners at the same time, which is very much part of this report, we should be able to have a better understanding of what are their constraints, concerns, and statutory measures that they have to take account of before they can engage with us for trail development. Phase 3, coming out at the end of the project, once we've looked at these examples, looked at some case studies and looked at how we can pull things together, we'll be looking at evaluating what we've done into the future. And SRAM are by no means protecting and holding this close to their hearts. They're looking for, and are very much open to, support from elsewhere in the industry, in the public sector, to hopefully take what we've achieved with this report, which I hope to be a sort of toolbox, a summary of different management models, and help try and get those rolled out further afield. So the first part of the work is a number of surveys and a number of case studies. And the first one is going to be rolled out online and sorted by postcode. Here we're going to be asking riders to tell us the story of their trails, tell us the story of the history of the trails. How long have they been here? Do a lot of people ride them? Is it only done by a few people? Do people travel? Do people make them a destination trail for the weekend? Or is it something that's very important to you because it gets you your exercise of an evening? And also tell us what's missing from your area. So if you have, for example, Dovey, a lot of people know we have a bike park with a world-class downhill facility. We have a lot of gnarly enduro trails. We have one red grade trail centre trail, but there's not a lot at the blue end of the spectrum and the flowy end of the spectrum in there, to give an example. So we're looking for what's missing in the makeup. And when we start plotting these across the UK on a GIS system, I think it's going to be fascinating seeing where we get the hotspots of different types of technicality, different types of riding, and also which are destination trails and which are, your everyday trail that people go to. But while we're doing this work as with the mountain bike community, we're also going to reach out further into the mountain bike community, and I want to engage specifically with the likes of the people we've got here tonight, the people who are out there digging, the people who are out there building the trails, the people who are approaching their councils and saying, how can we work with this? And I'd like to hear your stories. I'd like to hear these are methods you've tried. I'd like to hear the successes. I'd like to hear where you're finding the barriers to path success as well, as I'm all too aware from my work with W mountain biking. Things can appear to be going on quite nicely, and then you'll come up against a block for some reason. And it's by getting better understanding of what these blockages are, where these patterns are starting to emerge. We can also, by talking to the landowners at the same time, hopefully do some pattern recognition and look at, if we're seeing a barrier to progress in the mountain bike community, is that because of a concern, a constraint, a legal requirement from the land management community we may not be aware of. Also, by looking to case studies, I'm hoping we're going to see examples of where these concerns, constraints, etc., have been successfully negotiated. And these case studies are going to be pulled out of the report and highlighted as examples of good practice within the different management models, within the different land ownership models. So as the report gets published next year, I'm expecting to see some regional themes. So what applies in Scotland, it may be different to Northern Ireland. What applies in Wales may be different to England. And I'm also expecting to see other themes emerging, such as trails around a city environment will have different requirements, different constraints, different user groups to those out in the sticks like we are here in Scotland, here in Wales and up in Scotland. But also by asking people quantifiable questions, I'm hoping to be able to pick on those patterns and pick on those demands and areas where the mountain bike community is looking for help, and also where the land management community is looking for help. And we can put some statistics to that then and say, for example, 80% of people said they need help through a land management process, etc., etc. So this has been started by me touring the UK, and I would have liked to have got to a much wider number of places, but there's only so many weeks in the year that I can be on the road for. But that has been allowing me to get a feel for the workshop, get a feel for what people's thoughts are, and sort of refine the survey in front of a live audience. So people have been asked to scribble all over the questions, and some questions have been changed, some questions have been taken out. The survey, the one big thing on the feedback was make it more general, zoom out. We don't want to disclose everyone's secret tracks. We just want to know, let's say in SY20, there are off-piste trails, people ride them, and that's as far as I need to go with that level of information. So, I've taken that on board, and that will be going in. So a little bit about the themes that are emerging. We've seen, no matter what the land management model, or no matter what the region, there's a definite correlation between the amount of effort that people are putting in and the amount of reward the mountain bike community is getting back. But it's not just the reward to the mountain bike community. It's the effort the landowners are putting in and the reward that they're getting back. So down at the bottom, we've got, do bad things, lost trails. So that's, antisocial behavior, et cetera, et cetera. And we also got do nothing and no response. As we go up the sort of amount of effort going in, if people are being responsible, decent users of the forest, decent users of the countryside, several landowners, to my surprise, and there's a picture there of a well-known landowner having a nice chat with some mountain bikers, appeared to be fairly tolerant of people passing through their land. And more people have expressed sort of acceptance of this than I first thought might be the case. Moving onwards up the chart is sort of formal engagement with the land ownership and adoption of wild trails, the creation and giving back to mountain bikers the power to do some work on the tracks, to manage them, and to have the ear of the land management community when it comes up to operational constraints. So that obviously takes more people's time, more people's effort, both on the voluntary side and on the business side. But there's much more to be said for doing that. That's the sort of Tweed Valley model that we're familiar with. Right at the top of the effort reward tree is leasing a patch of land to build a bike park, build a skills area, build whatever. That can be seen as the most desirable in some points of view. The rider or the group of riders get to have a lot more control over what they're building and what it looks like, and the landowner gets to delegate a lot more of their health and safety responsibilities. But that has to be the right thing in the right place, and there's been some very good examples of these in the sort of Sheffield area, Northampton area, sort of repurposing sort of post-industrial areas. So that's certainly going into the case study. So the case studies are looking to put as many dots in these boxes as we can to pull out some good examples. So going along the x-axis along the top, we've got the sort of management agreement going up from tolerance to the full private business model. And then we're looking at the land management model. It could be private, public, third sector, the church being a big owner in, for example, Llandegla, or other MOD land has been talked about, and charities, any other kind of organisation. We're interested in hearing about that. So as much as I'd love to hear a load of different examples this evening, what I'd ask someone to do, if you're looking after the trail and you think I've got some interesting points to discuss here, please either drop me a message in the comment box, or drop me an email on the email address here, and I can find time to have a proper sit down with you with a cup of tea on Teams and talk about what you've got and take it through from there. So what Robin's asked us to have a think about today, because we've got so many people in from so many different parts of the mountain bike community. We have a little chat around the room via Robin's chairing. What would help you, the trail builders, what would help you, the mountain bikers, the most? If I was to take this feedback to British Cycling, to SRAM, to any of the public sector landowner bodies who are going to read this report, what would be the one thing you'd want to put in there? And again, we'll collect these in the text as we go along so we can get it all in there. And we'd also like people to think about what's the one thing the mountain bike community can do to help land managers. So we've already seen the more effort we're going to put in, the more we're likely to get back. And there's a heck of a lot of embedded knowledge within this community, both within the riders, within the informal trail builders and within people who do this for a living and look after trails for a living. So, let's dig into that expertise and see what we can do for help. So I'll pass you back to Robin, and he'll hopefully be able to share this through the through the screen and the hands up box, and we'll see how we can get on.
Cool, Dave. If you could turn your slides off, that would be amazing.
No problem.
And we should all be able to see each other. But yeah, what would help trail builders the most, and who can the MTB community, what can the bike community do to help landowners? So let's perhaps start with the first one. Dave, we can still see your screen.
Yeah,
perfect.
There we go.
You've done it. So hands up, anyone who wants to ask a question or who wants to contribute. While you're all thinking then, I probably should have prepared one earlier. Well, if you just let us have trails everywhere, Dave.
Yeah, why not? Job done. I can go home now. That would be the ultimate in some respects, but as the name of the report says, what we're looking for is to discover what's the right trail and what's the right place. I think it's fair to say we've got the right time. The fact that Robin and I have come to this from two completely separate angles at the same time suggests we've got a bit of a steam engine moment here of a lot of minds are thinking alike. And that makes me think we've not only got the right time, we've also got the right people here. Everybody in this room has taken time out of their evening where they could be watching Strictly, and we've come to sit down to talk about how we can manage trails. Not many people are here doing it for their own benefit. I mean, you don't have to. We could just go and dig a trail. We could just go and ride it. But to have it carrying on to the next generation and sort of preserving it for the future of the sport, I think is why so many people are willing to get engaged. But what we need to understand a little bit more is what's the right trail, what's the right place, and that's where it's listening to the landowner community, understanding the bigger picture of what the sort of three constraints that they have of a particular piece of land is, and how we can fit in around that, and not just fit in around it, but bring and add value to those pieces of land by being good tenants, good neighbours, good people to have in the community. I'll just throw in one other thing before we sort of get any more comments. So land managers have a sort of hierarchy of desirability with land users. Those who pay money and shop in their gift shops and buy cream teas are pretty much at the top. Those who start arson and fly tip are pretty much at the bottom. And those who float in the middle, could be get more access if they can get pushed up towards the top somehow. So what can we do with our expertise and our influence to move mountain biking along in that direction? Cool.
Okay, so we've thankfully now, while you've been talking, we've now got some people asking questions. Before I hand over to Kath, who had a hand up first, I just point out as well, we've also got, as well as lots of trail associations and bike parks and informal trail groups in the audience, we've also got quite a few landowners this evening. So obviously you guys should feel free to contribute as well. Let us know what you think that trail associations and bike parks can do for you, and also if you've got any ideas to help us, that would also be great. But having said that, I'll hand over to Kath.
Hi everyone, it's Kath here from Trail Collective North Wales. For me, I think the thing that would really help us would be somebody to actually help us actually engage with our landowners. We have kind of at Trail Collective North Wales have done pretty much, we've jumped through almost every hoop that has been set out for us by our landowner, but still I send them emails almost kind of every other week to ask about progress, to ask if we can meet, and we just get no response. I just have waited weeks, which we submitted our official permission document 13 weeks ago, and I've had really nothing back to even say thanks for your application, this is where you're up to. I've asked for if there's anything else we need to do, can I speak to someone? Are there any negotiations that need to happen? Are there any compromises we need to make? But I simply haven't heard back. So it just seems to be the terrible frustration of the inertia on the side of the landowners. And I understand that there are quite a few posts that are kind of empty in the permissions department, and that various people are off sick. And, you know, whenever anyone does contact me, they're very pleasant, and I think we have a decent relationship. But it's just the frustration of having put in almost a year of work to jump through the hoops and to complete the documentation, and then just getting nothing back. So I think that's where, you know, if there was an organisation that could help us, you know, maybe the UK Trail Project or us here at UK MTB Trail Alliance, just to kind of, I don't know, encourage, help us to get a response and get things moving. I think the frustration is really, really quite intense for us. We even managed to get insurance for our dig days, and that was a year ago, because, you know, we were sort of under the impression that things would move quite quickly. We haven't managed to run a single official dig day, and, you know, we've used money from donations to buy this insurance. And it's just the incredible slow progress. And I know we've got to be patient, but oh my God, it's frustrating. In terms of what we can do to help our land manager, well, we already have been working with Trash Free Trails and have done a number of big litter picks in the area. We've notified our landowner about fly tipping we've seen, suspicious behaviour, motorbikes tearing through the forest. So I feel like we're doing everything we can to help, and we're really pushing the be nice, say hi amongst our riding community, and try sort of reaching out to local walkers and horse riders. I just feel like we're putting in all the work and we're getting so little back. So that's our position so far.
So Dave, before you respond, just for the interest of balance, David Liddy from NRW has said in the chat that he always responds to emails straight away, Kat.
Yes. Dave does, but
Anyway,
it's not the forestry side of it. Dave is brilliant, but, you know, it's the frustration we have is with the foresters, the side of things are actually make the big difference to us as in terms of who we need to work with in the forest. Yeah, you know, we do have the support from Dave, and he's been absolutely brilliant. But it's the kind of the other side of the organisation that we're really struggling with. Okay,
so Dave, do you want to respond to everyone, or should we just get people throwing stuff out to you?
There's my mute button. No, that's a very good point, Kath. Thank you for that. I think we're just throwing things into the room now. I'm just scribbling things down to see if we can pick up themes as we're going on. I can't.
Okay.
And it's not within my remit to sort of try and help everybody. So let's get some more themes.
Well,
thank you, Kath.
In which case, let's hand over to Sam Bowell, who from B1KE, who he has his hand up. You're still on mute, Sam.
Look at all of these things, eh? Too many buttons. Yeah, nice one. Cheers, Robin, and cheers, David. I think really like to keep it as simple but as big information, which is killing a lot of relationships around here. Lack of information. I think there's a lot that we could do to simplify how people understand how land works, be that a working forest or someone's private land, and what's important to those people on a simplified level, but also helping people who aren't in the mountain bike community understand what we want and what we're trying to do at the same time, and how those things can interact. And although that's all very complicated, I think it can also be quite simple, or at least simple things can really help remedy a lot of those problems. We've just seen a large area of our local woodlands being taken out of action for the best part of 2023, actually, due to military operations. They've been training or working with Ukrainian forces, and we've all missed it a lot, from mountain biking through walking, through horse riding, whatever it may be. Whilst they've been doing that, there's also been a lot of forestry works undertaken. And now that it's all open again, there's been a lot of dismay, I would say, at the state of things and what the forestry has done, the forest operations have done to the ground. I've worked in ARB and understand why these processes happen, and also how difficult it is to make, especially when you're doing it in winter, which you generally have to do for ecological reasons as much as anything else, like how difficult it is to make it not destructive. But I also understand how important it is for that to happen. And the response is very much, well, they're all pissed off at us for making trails, but now look at what they're doing to the ground. And it gets a bit of a fight fire with fire sort of relationship going on. And that's just through a lack of information, really, and a lack of discussion on a fairly simple level. So I think on both of those points, Dave, all I'd say is simple and easy to transmit information, which the mainstream media could be doing a lot more, be that in mountain biking or otherwise. But yeah, I've been a subscriber to MB UK since I was 14, which is 25 years nearly, and I can't remember one article ever about any of these things. And I think that's a big chunk of information that's missing to the people who could really do with taking it in.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That's something that has been echoed a number of places around the UK, both from the landowner community and probably more so from the mountain bike community. And so we have a huge amount of media out there, we have a huge amount of outreach, and what can we do to get that positive message out and to make it easy for people to do the right thing? What is the right thing? How can we understand what the other people in the forest and on the land are doing? And so drip feeding and making that information accessible and easy to understand, easy to follow. Certainly a good one I'll put down there. Thank you.
Yvonne, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm Yvonne. I work at Queen Elizabeth Country Park, which is a county council managed site. We've had trails there for over 25 years, a red and a blue. During COVID, as with everywhere else, they saw a lot of use, and they're now looking a little bit degraded. We've got a fantastic trail collective who work quite hard on them. But what I wanted to say was there are frustrations on both sides. From the collective with, as people are saying, that the land managers aren't working fast enough. And for us at the collective, I suppose, are too keen and want to do too much. And we can't keep up with that. As a family site, we've got other things to balance up with that, with the dog walkers and everything else. And as a county council, we have very little money to put towards anything, and they aren't raising enough to do the work that they want to do to the trails. And what else was I going to say? That there's the risks as well. Again, as a county council, it's always all about managing the risk and making sure everything's safe. And I haven't been able to find any guide. I'm a mountain biker, which has helped the collective. I'm the first member of staff there for many years who actually rides a bicycle, which has made a huge difference. But I don't know anything about how to build a trail or how big a drop should be on a blue or anything like that. So there's quite a kind of a bit of a loggerhead there as well as to how the trail should actually look, and whether it should be up to the collective to decide how they look, or us as the landowners who are ultimately responsible, we think, for the risk that people are undertaking when they ride. I think that was everything I had to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Yvonne. I wanted to reach out and get in touch for a case study, perhaps, because what you've got there is ticks one of the boxes on the matrix of having the collective on the public sector land there. Again, the speed that the public sector takes, and even the private sector takes when you're talking in forestry, needs to be better understood. That's something that's come up time and time again around the whole country. You're dealing with an industry where the crop takes 40 to 50 years to grow. So that's the kind of pace we're working at, where the mountain bike community would ideally like a trail by next weekend for a race. So there is a sort of disproportionate response of expectation and reality there. So again, perhaps that would be better understood if we could feed those examples through. With regard to the technical advice, we have a heck of a lot of technical ability within the industry in terms of sort of people who turn professional as trail builders. So I do wonder if there's potentially scope there for having some kind of UK specific guidance. Yes, we do have the IMBA guidance, but UK soils, UK weather, very much different to what we see in America. So maybe there's something there we could look into. I have noted that down. Thank you very much.
Cool. Kieran?
Hello, sir. Hello, Dave. So Kieran, I'm the National Off-Road Advisor for Cycling UK. How much longer, we don't know, but that's a discussion that Robin and I have been having. But broadly, over the past 20 years of advocacy, I think the things that have stood out for me would be, firstly, that division of the position of access, even access to woodland, and even then access to Forestry England and Forestry Commission woodland is there's a very clear lack of consistency within the approach taken there. So, you know, if we want it to be inclusive for lots of people, we've seen the data on where e-bikes ride, which is largely forest road. Even before we start talking about, should we say, unauthorized trails and sanctioned trails, even that position of regularizing the access position of bicycles to Forestry England and other public sector land is one of the questions. Mark Weston from the British Horse Society and I had I think it's fair to say, somewhat fractious meeting with some very senior people, the heads of access at Forestry England and also Forestry Commission, the Four Nation basis, and with DEFRA, about the position of even access to forest roads. You know, they wouldn't even accept the principle of cycle access on all Forestry England roads because health and safety. And it's like, but you've already given there is a Section 16 grant of Crow right of access on foot. So how can you justify that as being, you can't allow cyclists on a health and safety basis, but it's open for walkers? None of it seemed to add up, and it does seem to be an element of protecting their own position. But so there is really that question of, regularizing the position of access for the green and blue trails before we get onto trail building or sanctioned or unauthorized trails. But then I think the second issue that's really stood out for me over the years is the propensity of riders who want to build trails to want to build progressive trails rather than wanting to build the greens and blues that build that pyramid of riders other than themselves. It's been very interesting to engage with a lot of the American groups when I've been over to the States with IMBA and see that the trail associations are actually quite keen on building trails, not for them, but for the wider sport, kids' trails and family trails. And actually those groups are quite keen on doing the building for that rather than focusing solely on the permissions for progressive trails for themselves. So I think there's a lesson for maybe the riding community that if we're just building trails for the 1%, then it's going to be very difficult to engage with those major public sector landowners to justify putting the time and effort into supporting it. We maybe need to look at how we can grow the sport on a wider basis rather than just building for ourselves. Hope that's helpful.
Cool. And just to add something on that, access is really important because, as Kieran said, we don't have a right to be in the forests in England, at least. The situation's slightly different in Wales and obviously very different in Scotland. There are obviously things happening outside of us. Both in English politics and Welsh politics. Just to let you all know, the UK MTB Trail Alliance, alongside both Cycling UK and British Cycling, I've joined the Outdoors for All coalition, which is a coalition of now about 40 plus outdoor organisations campaigning for greater access. So, we're hopeful that if there is a new administration, in the UK, who will be looking at access from an English perspective, you know, we're hopeful there might be some movement there in future. But Dave, I'll just hand over to you to pick up on anything else.
Sorry, Robin, if I just throw one thing in there, which is,
Yeah,
even within Forestry England, we have different regions of Forestry England having different access policies for bikes and horses. We then have the difference between the forestry freehold estate and the forestry leasehold estate. And then we have other public sector organisations. So obviously one of the key points would be having a consistent approach across public sector landowners would actually be a very important step in how we solve the problems, because we just need consistency.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Kieran. And so I do admire the work that Cycling UK have been doing on the advocacy side for so long. And it's certainly something that's come up in certain points around the UK more than others. Lake District and the Peak District being key points where the sort of inconsistencies in the access network and the rights of way network prevent people sort of linking up a nice circular ride, for example. So, and I also must echo again what you said about there being the need to focus on the trail for the majority of users. It's definitely come out in a number of places around the UK. And, you know, it's another thing I'm starting to see with the data hotspots that are coming through, that areas that are full of NAR don't have anything for the bringing people on. So I used to guide mountain bikes in the Dubby Forest. I stopped doing it because it's not commercially viable, because you can't run a takeaway if you only offer Vindaloo. You've got to have something for everybody. And I heard a sad story from somebody in the cycling industry in Sheffield, said, my kids, 16 and 18, don't ride. You know, the whole of the Ride Sheffield thing, the whole of the blue-green trail thing happened a few years too late to catch their interest. So yeah, there's a lot that needs to be done by our generation if we want the sport to carry on through to the next generation. Otherwise, if those with kids will have been there, you know, halfway up a hill, crying, halfway down a hill, crash, don't like it, too hard, I'll just go and play football. So yeah, so a number of very, very good points. Thank you, Kieran.
Cool. So we now got lots of hands up, which is great. Joe, you're next, but if I could ask everyone to be as brief as possible, and Dave, maybe only respond if you've got yeah, you've got something to say, I suppose. Go, Joe.
Thanks, Robin. So Joe Atkinson, Wiley Bike Park, and I'm also a member of Risk Riders, which is a neighbouring trail area. Just really sort of picking up, reinforces a few points already. So in terms of what would help most as a mountain bike group would be for trail building would be a strategic framework setting out clear guidance and boundaries for developing and managing wild trails on public land. You know, to include what can and can't be built, what is acceptable, and I think that picks up on the accessibility trails. You know, if you want to be building trails, you've got to be building trails that, one, don't require, you know, there is the option to roll. You don't have to do a massive drop, for example, which is what I've seen in like the Malverns over in Quantock. But also, you know, making trails accessible to new riders, newcomers. You know, we've got a patch of land that I think would be absolutely perfect for a nice little blue trail to help bring people on, a little skills area. You know, there is a small group that have built some sort of like a little pump track there, and you know, it's perfect. But also that framework should include some clarity around the legal position that trail builders find themselves in, because I think that a lot of the concerns, people not wanting to come forward or not necessarily know because they don't know what the rules are and things like that, you know, just do things under, you know, behind closed doors. And then the second point really would be, so we've got a massive problem in Wiley with motocrossers. I have lost, well, I have counted actually how many times I've reported. NRW keep telling me to keep reporting them. I encourage loads of people to report them. We've had hundreds of reports over the last 5 or 6 years. Not one operation has ever been run. You know, we've been riding down trails and come face to face with a motocrosser riding up. It's dangerous. Someone is going to get seriously hurt and nothing is done about it. So that's it for me.
Cool. Dave, do you want to say anything, or should I hand over to?
No, I've noted that down. The framework has come up several times, as have the motorbike, so sort of management of other users.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
as most of you know, we're in the middle of our membership survey. So those of you who haven't answered it yet, you've got until a week today. We've already had quite a few responses though, and actually, yeah, motocross bikes, electric motocross bikes, is coming through as a much bigger problem than I thought it was. I knew it was a real problem in South Wales, but it appears to be a problem all across the UK, much more so than I certainly realised personally. Anyway, hand over to Sophie, who's had that question hand up for the longest, I think.
Oh, I don't know if Andrew was first because he's to the left of
You,
me.
well, maybe. I think you were.
Thanks, Robin. Love you.
Okay, well, mine's a quick one.
Go on.
Sorry, Andrew, if you were actually first. Yeah, it's sort of coming back to what Sam was saying about information and the comment that Dave Liddy put in the chat at the beginning about sort of saying we need to stop building in designated sites. And I guess it's, yeah, providing that information of how do people easily find out what is a designated site? Because we have triple SIs, we have special areas of conservation, we've got special protected areas, all these different acronyms for things. And you might go somewhere and kind of think, oh yeah, I think this is a nature reserve. But yeah, there are so many different protected areas that I guess a lot of people are just in the woods and they don't know that what's protected and what's not. So yeah, how can we make it easier for people to know that, and if they want to do the right thing, to avoid those areas and be in the less sensitive ones?
Sorry to jump in. There are loads of public maps available for that sort of thing.
But people don't know
so
how to find them necessarily, I guess, is the thing.
No, it's maybe advertising things like magic maps to the general public would be useful. But sorry to jump in. I just thought I'd get it there.
So some kind of sort of tutorial or some kind of how-to. It's all out there. It's just understanding how to get to it. Yeah.
Cool. Andy.
Thank you. So sorry, Andrew. Sorry, I had to join a little bit late, so I missed the first 15 minutes or so. But I did a question. I sort of, at the moment, we're at Marshley Harbour Woods. We're actually considering some of the things I've been hearing on here. I think I'm pretty fortunate. But I originally started at Port with Mike back in the day, trails. So we built a load of trails there. They've been running about 20 years. We've got an agreement with the council, which is really good. And we've set guidelines that people are asking about, guidelines about rollable, nothing above knee height. But we're still building trails that interest us. But if we want to do the big steely stuff, we go Dirt Farm, Bike Park Wales, all of that. So we've got this local trail, 17 Woods. One of the biggest problems we've been having is with Till Hill Forestry Services, who I think earlier this year came in with a 3.5 ton digger and literally flattened every trail we built in a way that if we'd done it, would probably been accused of criminal damage. It was absolutely horrific what they did, using taxpayers' money as well. But we have rebuilt, and the council is still happy that we're doing it. But one of the biggest problems we're getting, we are in the woods with walkers, and we do stop and talk to them. We stop to the dog walkers, but we still get a lot of people walking up the trails, not realizing that they're bike trails. And we try to put signs up, but they just keep getting destroyed. And I really want to get some big burly ones and like screw them into trees and stuff, but I know that's not the way. I'd just be interested to know what people have been doing to put signs up that maybe put them high, or how you're attaching them, or what you're putting them on. Just experience of that, because I think that would definitely help relations on the trails for us.
Maybe we'll ask. Perhaps we'll ask the floor that later on, Andy, when we're past this stage. But David, if you want to come back on anything, I'll hand over to next.
I don't have any specific examples on that, but I'll certainly put like problems with other users. There's two things to take away there. Is one, that despite you're putting the agreement in and going up that ladder, you still ended up down the bottom with trash trails, which is very sad to hear. Yeah. And also the problem with walkers and people, just other forest users on the trails. So I'll just put that down the list.
I did meet the guy who authorised it, and he was apologising profusely for it. It seemed to be a miscommunication, and somebody got a bit keen on a digger. But,
anyway, Jez, you've got your hand up. We can't see you, but hopefully we'll be able to hear you when you come off mute.
Okay, yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Right, cool. Jez Sainter from Single Traction. We're sort of around Western North Yorkshire. We've been going for over 20 years. We have a very good relationship with the Forestry England, our Forest Commission for Stainburn and Dalby, and we get on well with them. I understand people's frustrations because things are quite glacial from, you know, for somebody who wants to be out there next week digging. Things take time. You have to put a lot of effort in to get what you want. And I do understand where people come from when they say things like, well, we just want to put a trail in here or whatever. But you are working with somebody who produces timber. And I think one of the issues with the Forest Commission is they don't designate areas for recreation, for forestry. So you could make it much easier from my point of view if they go, well, anything around here is recreation. So if forestry want to go in, they've got to get together with recreation and agree a plan so they do less damage. And if recreation want to go in and put a trail into the forestry area, they have to go and negotiate with the forestry people, and maybe have to go, you know, because forestry is sold in blocks. So you might have to say, well, you'll have to go between that block and that block, or so it might not give you the best trail, but then it would be less damaged because, you know, so the two sides need to work together better, if that makes sense. From trails everywhere type of thing, as you were saying, yes, definitely you want more urban trails like Leeds Urban Bike Park. We've built the Devil's Toenail in Wetherby, so the local kids can get to it. I've got somebody in Pontefract who wants to turn an old muckstack into a bike park. Whether that'll ever happen, I don't know, but owned by Haworth Estates. I get contacted 3 or 4, well, every couple of months, some little village somewhere wants a pump track. I've spoken to a lady today who wants one, and we'll be having a meeting with her. She's got a meeting later in the week, and maybe 1 in 10 of those gets built. And a lot of that, she was interested in were things like, what can she do? And landowner responsibility comes up a lot, insurance, designs. So single traction as such, we do all the designs for them. We'll work with them. We'll turn up on the day and help them build things. But you know, I actually find it pretty easy to be honest with you. So we've got council land, we've got forestry land, but it just takes a hell of a long time to get things done.
You're saying as a professional in the industry, you find the industry, the forest industry, you know, okay to work with, but it does take time to get through.
Yeah. Well, that's because I used to work for them as well as a trail builder for Clixby's, but now this is in the single traction role as a volunteer.
Okay.
So that wasn't a Clixby side of things. That was from a single traction side of things.
But I suppose, Jez, you've got 20 years of experience doing it. I suppose that's probably one of the key things.
Yeah. Well, I think things like what is a blue trail, what is a red trail, what is a black trail. It just off the top of my head, you know, you just know how to design things, how to build things. I don't really have an issue with any of that sort of stuff, so I can do it without referring to anything, I suppose. I could just look at a trail and go, yeah, that'll work there.
So I suppose the lesson then is having, you know, is bringing in the right expertise for the right project, maybe.
I mean, cool. We do quite a lot of work at Dolby as volunteers, and I try and work with the rec rangers there, and we pick off things that the volunteers add value with. So there are certain sections of trail which would cost an absolute fortune to get a contractor in to fix it, because of just the access. So, but with a group of guys and wheelbarrows, it might take us 3 dig days, you know, because of once a month up there. But we can get that done because we're literally wheelbarrowing stone and rock down an almost vertical rock face to get it done. But you wouldn't get in with a machine without paying an absolute fortune. And maybe that's the thing with having the commercial experience. I know where the best place is to make the most bang for your buck out of volunteers.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? That's one of the things that we can do for landowners, I suppose, is to, you know, is to help identify, but once they're identified, especially, you know, actually get the volunteers in to do that work that would otherwise be prohibitively expensive for contractors to do, even if that's what they normally would do. Cool. Yeah. Tim, you've had your hands up for a while.
Just say I'll pick up with Jez outside of this if we could. That would be absolutely brilliant to discuss further. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, the point I had kind of, we drifted off because I've been waiting a while, but then it kind of came back around to it, so that worked well. I think what I was going to sort of raise a point of is this sort of issue of risk and landowners. It's one that comes up regularly and is like sort of one of the big scary things that everyone always seems to think about. You know, one point that I've made, sort of various people I've been working with is, you know, particularly if you've already got wild trails on your hill, then, you know, landowners need to kind of realize that the risk already exists, you know, and kind of trying to ignore the trail builders or ignore the situation isn't risk management, you know, and the answer to it is in the word management, which is, you know, you have to manage the situation. So when it comes to wild trails on your land, for example, you know, you have a duty of care over that land, and there's different ways you can approach it. You could say, well, I don't want this on my land, so I'm going to put a stop to it. But then you actually actively have to put a stop to it, because if you know it's there and you're not doing anything to prevent it and someone gets hurt, in theory, that could come back to you. The other, and the way I much prefer, is you actually say, well, you know, this is here. It's not necessarily a bad thing unless it's in an area that's causing a particular problem. So maybe there's actually an opportunity here where, you know, working with the right people and managing it can be the good outcome for kind of everyone. So I think, and it brings me on to the sort of next point about people talking about the sort of trails types that you see in wild trails, and the fact that you generally see the sort of more progressive and more difficult, quote unquote, dangerous kind of trails. I mean, that's kind of a logical outcome, because the kind of people who go and build trails are enthusiastic people who are generally means that they're pretty into mountain biking and therefore have been doing it for a while and are relatively experienced. You know, you're not going to get a lot of newbies willing to put hours and hours every weekend for nothing into building trails for a hobby that they've kind of just got into. Building blues and greens, things like that, you know, in terms of our sort of bike park, we always saw that as the way to increase your footfall. You know, if you widen it out to a wider audience, you increase the amount of customers potentially, and therefore the amount of revenue you can potentially generate. So that works for a commercial operation like ours, but the problem you get for a lot of these sort of community-led ones is there's no one there putting any incentive to build it for everyone else, because there's no economic incentive to it, and it costs a lot of money to build these trails for other people who may, you know, be the kind of people that can bring problems to your site, like, for example, inexperienced riders, more likely to get hurt, more likely to pursue compensation and things like that. So if you're looking to get more blue and sort of green trails, then you either need to look for sort of public funding, or you need to start thinking about sort of commercial operations, because like I say, they're great for business. The more people you bring to your park, the more customers, the more money you can make. But as a community-led thing, probably not the best thing, because they're going to potentially flood your site with people that you can't manage, or you're not got the resources to manage, and potentially create more issues with people getting injured and things like that. So I don't know if that makes context in what I was saying, but that was sort of my thoughts on what people said.
That's really interesting, because I think when I dropped the case studies into that land ownership and management matrix, I think if I start color coding those by the type of trail that we're seeing in each of those boxes, it might throw out sort of where each one's where each one's turning up, but also where each one would be more appropriate. So we have to see that, again, the right trail in the right place can be in terms of management model, as well as the physical model on the ground with traveller size, etc. So no, that's a really, really interesting point. Thanks.
Just to pick up on that one, in absence of anyone else's hands. So while I'm talking, think of something to contribute, guys. Is that could work both ways, in terms of something that landowners can do for trail associations and trail groups, and also something that trail groups and, you know, can do for landowners, which is, you know, actually perhaps we do need to build a blue trail, you know, or a red trail, in order for the landowners to be happy with the black trails that we built. Do you see what I mean? You know, that's perhaps part of the deal.
Yeah, but again, this is kind of a misconception. Like, if you're talking about landowners' perception of risk and liability, because they have far less liability on the black trail than on the blue trail.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Like, you know, there's
it has. I mean, it has come up in some of the discussions I've been involved with between trail associations and one of the big landowners is the Trail Association doesn't really want to build any red or blue or green trails, and these are trails that have become official landowner signposted trails, because they don't want to ride those trails themselves. So that it does come up. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps it's not a mainstream problem, but it definitely does come up occasionally. So Sam's got something to contribute. Go, Sam.
Sure, yeah, and just again thinking about this with the grading, to be honest, I think the expectation on blue and green has probably changed quite a lot in recent times as well. And now when we consider what is a blue trail, we think of something that's probably a couple of meters wide, generally quite flowy and relatively flat, which is not achievable, as Tim says, as a volunteer-led thing, really, and also in a lot of areas where the sheer gradient and ground type is not going to allow for a hand build of that sort. So a clearer view as to what grading actually means, again, kind of goes back to that information pack. Like, what is a green trail and who is that accessible to, and what is a blue trail, and consistency amongst that, because again, people have spoken about inconsistencies with Forestry England to pull one organisation out of the hat. That's true of their grading systems as well. Even though there is a defined system in place, you can go to Bedgebury and you can go to Alice Holt, and then you can go to Fod, for instance, and their blues, reds, blacks are very, very different things. And that makes it not only difficult for a rider to understand, or for potentially a non-rider to understand, but actually for people who are trying to provide that, as well as people who are trying to gather information from that, because they've got trails turning up on their land. So I think a greater consistency on that, and a much better understanding and definition of what they are will help people to understand that.
Yeah, the mountain bike community could have helped to advise the land management team, and have some kind of consistency on that. Yeah.
Cool. Will, on your iPhone, was that you putting your hand up to ask a question, your actual hand, or was that me? Was that me misunderstanding? You're on mute, so I don't know what you're saying.
On mute. There we go.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Was it you asking a question?
Sorry. So, just to go back to David's project, and asking what would be really good to come out of it. A structure that people can go to, because sorry, I'm Will and I run Oakford Hill Bike Park, and my bike park is on Forestry Commission land, who have been really good. I've been there 8 years, and it really seems to be evolving in the requirements. And it's not that, so Forestry aren't cyclists per se, they are not a mountain biking group. So getting to the result of how to run something is not always, they're not going to tell you how to run something necessarily. It's evolving. You need to be part of a conversation with them. So what would be really good to come out of this project would be a structure. So that structure would include grading, an easy guide to grading, because it exists in other places but not here. Documentation, insurance. So insurance has not been easy in the last 12 months. And also teaching, a structure. If you're delivering teaching, especially to children, it can involve many different associations. It doesn't have to be one particular association, but a sort of standard for a structure for that. So if, let's say, a bike park gets approved on a particular piece of land, that your project would say, okay, this is great, and at this level, this type of project, these are the kind of things, or these are the things you're going to have to do to please your land manager, in that you're going to have considered all of these different things. That structure would be fantastic, and it's not something that's there right now. it's definitely an evolving process at the moment.
Thank you. That would be amazing to be able to do that, to have actually got a sort of toolbox of resources. And I hope to think that the matrix approach between different land management type and different land ownership type, again, in all the 4 different home countries of the UK, as we've touched on already, there's different access rules, there's different insurance rules in the different home countries. That'll give us a sort of a number of case studies. And again, hopefully we can dig into those deeply enough, we might be able to start pulling out consistencies and looking at what we can pull together. Thank you.
Cool. James?
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, guys. That's been quite interesting so far. Just going back to where Kath started with her point regarding not necessarily being recognised by the large stakeholders as little individual communities, which many of our trail associations are. I think something I'd really like to see from this is a real connection and collaboration of all the groups being brought together underneath our NGBs, which is our British cycling, our Welsh cycling and Scottish cycling, so that collectively when we do speak to our local landowners or stakeholders or small estates, they can recognise that we're not just a group of mountain bikers in the woods, we're actually part of a national governing body that's recognised, that follows a path and a sequence, and we're legitimate, and legitimising what we do and what we want to do, and that being recognised by a national governing body would help our cause. And then insurance would become easier, dig days become easier, recognition becomes easier, and the process all over the UK surely would be easier.
That's ironically something that's been echoed by the land management community, because if they want to talk to horse riders, they go to the British Horse Society. If they want to talk to climbers, they go to the BMC. If you're a climber with BMC membership, you've got your third-party insurance. Several land managers have turned to me and said, what's British cycling for? And that is something perhaps where it could help. We're looking to create more places to ride and bring more to the community.
That's a question many of us have asked ourselves in the past, actually, Dave.
So just for a moment, right? So effectively, everything that needs to happen within mountain biking has happened at British Horse Society or at the British Canoe Union or with the BMC. So all these NGBs that are in the outdoors that are basically, I mean, climbers can go to the BMC website and look at whether a quarry has a nesting peregrine's nest and when not to climb. So we need our NGB, whether it's a trail association collective with members who pay a divvy to help us help them run their business what it needs to be, but allowing everybody to recognize the work that needs doing for the mountain bike community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it echoes a lot of what's being asked for by the land management community. And I've certainly scribbled down here, go and look at other NGBs. You know, I do other sports, many of us here do other sports, and we're not unfamiliar with that. And perhaps there's some really good examples there.
Cool. Andrew, I think you've had your hand up for the longest.
Yep. So I'm Andrew. I'm CAF side MTB in Exeter. Yeah, I was just going to agree with quite a lot of the other points. We've had quite a good relationship for about 5 or 6 years with Forestry England. We're in the process of putting in planning and stuff. But yeah, the hardest bit we found is what order to do stuff in. We've gone like jumping about quite a lot because we didn't know which way to do stuff. So then they say, oh no, you need to do this. So then we go and do that. And then they're like, oh no, now you need to do this before that bit. So yeah, some sort of structural like case study of this is how other people's do it would be really helpful. And then the latest big thing we've got is ecology and all that side of things as well. Sort of similar to what thing you just said about the climbers and that they've brought up night jars on one bit of land next to where we want to build. And then looking into that, they're only there for a couple of months a year, but it still seems to be a massive sticking point with to do with planning permission and stuff. Is the ecology, wildlife, and stuff like that, basically. So it's another big issue we were having.
Okay. but an issue that wouldn't be insurmountable if we were to be able to have that communication, understanding, and that's a statutory constraint from the landowner. You cannot disturb a nesting bird. It's a legal constraint, and we as the mountain bike community, if we could understand that, disseminate that, and respect that within the community, then hopefully that would, get things like this, really good projects like this across the line and through planning, because they know they're dealing with sensible people.
Cool. Hannah?
Sorry, I'm looking a bit Bohemian Rhapsody here. Yeah, I was listening to the conversation about the green trails and blue trails, and that has a sort of public funding demand for it, and the landowners kind of want it. The trail associations don't necessarily want to build that stuff. I was wondering whether there's like a halfway house between that, like a skills area. So you have your pump track kind of in the park that the council builds, and then you have your small jump or your single tabletop. So it's not a trail, it's just one feature that you practice. And then you have the drops where you start off with a tiny drop and you have a slightly bigger one, and then you have a slightly bigger one, so that you would be providing that kind of progression opportunity between the absolute green trail of riding around the park and the fun gnar stuff and building those skills that you need to go and do the stuff that the trail builders are actually wanting to build themselves. And it seems like that's something that you get at the skills areas at some of the bigger trail centres, but it's not something you see so much like locally away from that. And it's just the kind of thing that my kids want to go and ride on. So it just seemed to me like maybe that's the sort of thing that trail builders could be using their skills to build, and it would help bridge that gap between what people want to fund and that appetite for risk. So
cool.
Yeah.
So we've got lots more hands up. I'm going to take everyone's questions, but just to set the context, I think I want to switch our attention in a minute once everyone with their hands up has a chance to make their points to what we can as a community can do for landowners, and then I also would then want to give us time to ask Dave some hard questions or easy questions as they may be about the UK Trails project. And it's a big part of what he's here for tonight, is to answer your questions about the project he's working on. We are fast running out of his time, so he's got an early start tomorrow morning to drive somewhere a long way away from where he is now. So
more land managers meetings, so I'm leaving the house at 6 tomorrow. So I'd like to wrap this up by that past if possible.
So don't feel like you need to fill the gaps. Just try and concentrate on what's really important to say, I suppose, because we haven't got much time, even though it feels like we're perhaps at some stages we're struggling for people to make points. I'm not sure who had the hand up first, but Sam, you go, and then Jez second.
Sure, I'll try to be quick. I think to follow on from Hannah's point a little bit, skills area, I mean, I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with skills areas to a degree. I think a lot of the time it's not necessarily particularly relevant to on-track environments. However, the area I'm from, sort of Hampshire, Surrey area, where the ground is flatter, but I don't think there's any argument that we're in one of the more affluent areas of the UK. What we do have is an abundance of trail centres that are built for the community, essentially, and trail centres or facilities for that, including at Queen Elizabeth Country Park, where they've just done loads of extra skills areas. They've got a pump track for mini wheels under 20 inches, plus a skills area, plus the green loop, plus the blue loop, and that's really great. And I think what maybe Tim's going to be a little bit more familiar with is in that those areas around Wales where probably trail centres are built around cross-country, old school cross-country routes as much as anything, and more gnarly ground. They don't have that facility so much. So maybe actually what we can do as a collective is start to fill those holes, which hopefully Dave will start seeing in his survey stuff, like where do we have these facilities more, and how can we spread our experiences. What we obviously have in the southeast is a great wealth of knowledge on how to build fairly accessible trails. We've got Queen Elizabeth Country Park, we've got Swinley, we've got all of these little areas that come together, and then miniature bike parks and renowned single track areas. What we don't have is big mountain riding, and how can we sort of influence between the two of them. So
cool. Jez, and then Manon can't put her hand up but wants to ask a question, so she can go after Jez.
Hi, yeah, I was just for Hannah. I would just say go to the Devil's Toenail at Wetherby if she wants to see a small skills area with a little pump track for tiny kids, another one in between, little jumps, 5 jumps in a row, some little drops and everything. And that's fitted into an area that's about 250 metres long, 150 metres wide, and goes to a point. And then there's a little pump track at the top of the hill. Done.
Cool. Manon?
Hi, yeah, maybe, I don't know, a comment question for Dave, which I'm sure you're thinking of. But with this discussion of different grade trails and what different trails cost to put in, it'd be interesting in your case studies to see what different types of case studies or projects have costed to get them off the ground, and where funding has come from, and how how groups have initiated that. And yeah, basically what is needed to get a different projects off the ground. So different kind of trails, blues, greens, and then hand built. I think everyone realizes that blues and greens are a lot more investment. So yeah, how, if that's what's wanted, what's needed, basically.
Sure, I've noted that to put in the case studies. So yeah, we can include that information.
Cool. Tim, you had your hand up. You're taking that down. Nothing. Okay, and then Andrew and Jez, you still got your hands up. I presume that's you just forgot to take them down. So one point I wanted to make before we move on was, and it sort of, it's just, I suppose, just pull out what Kath was saying right at the beginning is not uncommon. You know, from talking to lots of people, lots of trail associations all over the country, you know, part of the problem is they find one, I suppose, advocate within a landowner, quite often at a national level, but it's very hard to, you know, for that one person within the organisation to follow through. So there's a real resource problem within our big national forestry organisations, I think, that is a real blockage to getting stuff done. And it's not that they don't have specialist mountain bike staff or cycling staff, as they do perhaps, you know, for example, Forestry England, the Forest of Dean. The problem is in the areas is where they don't have current cycling provision. You know, it is very hard to work with them as organisations in those scenarios, because the local teams don't have the time, the knowledge, or quite often the inclination to actually get anything done. And I think that's quite a widespread issue across all 4 nations, to be honest. So having said that, so has anyone got anything to add in terms of, you know, what we can do to help landowners? No hands currently.
One thing that's come from the landowners, and a number of them have said this to me, we'd love to help. We'd love to do more. There's not enough of us. There's not enough budget, and it's been cut for the last 14 years. So if you want to see more activities on the land, it's not just bikes, it's riding with the disabled, it's mental health outreach, it's the Cubs, it's the Scouts, it's the forest schools. They want to do more for all of it. And we're one of the many users of this leisure centre without a roof. So write to your MP and say, give more funding to the outdoor spaces. So that's something that's come from several landowners to me, to have something the community can do. So you know, demand more resource from the top where it comes from. So I'll just throw that one out there as something we could potentially look to do as a community and cascade.
Cool. So Tim's got his hand up again, but also, like, we've got a few landowners on this call. So if any of you want to tell us what we could do for you, then please do. But Tim.
Yeah, I kind of want to touch on this sort of the toolkit stuff that you talked about, David. It's something that I've kind of banged the drum about for kind of a decade now. Dave Liddy will probably remember me talking about this in a previous iteration of this format. You know, we don't have any standards as such, certainly not any sort of nationally recognized standards that when we're building a bike trail, a bike park, or operating a bike park, we can go to the big book of bike parks and see what the rules are. And the problem is it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You know, on the one hand, it terrible because I lie awake at night and think, did I do that report properly? Am I doing my right in trail inspections? Is some solicitor someday going to tell me I've done it all wrong and I'm completely liable? The other side of the coin of it, though, is that it's also a useful tool for solicitors to use to nitpick through everything you do to see if you've missed off any of the any of the 100 or 1,000 or so regulations that you need to meet as a bike park. So my stance on this has always been that this is absolutely something we need, and it is an inevitability that eventually it will happen. We've all been relatively lucky in the sense of, whilst injuries and things like that are fairly common, we've never had the really big show-stopping national news coverage kind of incident that generally leads to the demands for this industry to be regulated and that sort of thing. So my kind of attitude is that to a certain extent, I'd rather continue getting away with not needing it, but with the view that it's probably coming down the line eventually, we should probably do it to ourselves rather than have someone else do it to us. The last thing we want, and I'm not going to name any names, but is certain sort of larger bodies that maybe aren't that connected to mountain biking setting the rules and regulations on our behalf. And if we put the effort in to create these things for ourselves, which is useful for landowners and things like that, then the day that something really bad happens and all these spotlights fall on us and people start demanding regulation, we can say, well, actually, we've already got a lot of this industry standard stuff, and governments and various organizations being quite lazy will pretty much pick up that and say, okay, well, we'll go with this then, rather than having to do all the work ourselves. So I support it, but I think it's something that needs to be cautious, and it needs to be done with very close collaboration with various organizations like trails and centers, bike parks, etc., so that we can live to it, B, it doesn't completely stifle development of the sport, and particularly the smaller entities. So yeah, anyway, I've rabbled enough. But I think
that's an absolutely fundamental point. As a number of landowners have said to me, basically, you lot can't have the pony until you can look after the gerbil. So get your house in order and show that you can do things to a professional standard, and then we can start and then we can get the basics right, and then we can start talking about the bigger stuff. So if we were able to do that from within the industry, but again, I wouldn't want to see anything like you see in the electrician's world, like that you have to comply to the 19th edition to the ... For a jump must be so high and the burn must be of such a radius. But if we can look, so stepping back a level to principles, governing principles of outdoor safety, such as the VSG group, such as HSE recommendations, so we can look that we're building within a framework that we talked about earlier. That might be some ways that we can sort of manage what we're building within our community, and create best practice from within. I hope that's something that I don't think we'll be able to do a full toolbox on that within the 3 years we've got, but we can certainly have some case studies that are good examples. And if we look to reflect why are they good examples by looking at VSG best practice and other sort of governing bodies of health and safety, we can hopefully show that you can have fun in the countryside, you can have a certain amount of risk, and it can be done with a reasonable duty of care.
I think, sorry to jump back in, I know as people are waiting, but just to push back a little bit on the sort of the landowner perspective that you gave there of learn to look after the gerbil before the horse. I mean, you could push that back to a certain landowner and say, well, maybe you should learn how to look after your land. You've got illegal building activity going on your land. You should be fencing it off. You should be having security. This is the sort of attitude, the thing that often is missed, and I know it's not always the case, is that the people, particularly the more organized ones that are developing, looking after trails, they're doing landowners a favor, because quite frankly, the landowner should be managing that situation, and it's very difficult. I'm not saying that it's easy and that they should be kicking people off or that's even possible, but there is that kind of thing as like you're giving the hard time to the very people who are trying to manage your risk for you, and whereas actually what you should probably do is lean on them more and kind of trust them more, and work with them more, not sort of say, well, you need to jump through all these hoops to prove to me that you're capable of managing my land. No, it's your land. You need to manage it. If you don't want us here, stop us being here. I know that's kind of a hard line approach. I'm not saying that applies to everything. I'm just sort of, as a devil's advocate to the sort of landowner perspective, I guess.
Yes, interesting point on it. Yeah.
Anyway, so I'll be quiet now.
Mark? Oh, you're on mute still, Mark.
Hello. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Robin. Tim slightly thrown me since I put my hand up with his final comment. But as a land manager, yeah, it would. The problem would go away if we could kick mountain bikers off the Surrey Hills. We wouldn't have an issue. But what I wanted to talk about was, in fact, David has slightly answered the question as well, when he said about forming a body, and there's something I've talked about a lot, is there needs to be a collective body, or it'd be great to have a collective body for the mountain bikers that represented the mountain bikers, like the British Horse Society have. I think you've got other problems in that mountain biking is such a diverse group of people. We've joked about the fact you put 3 mountain bikers in a room and you'll come out with 5 different arguments. Everyone has a different opinion, so it's very hard to get mountain bikers to agree. But I do think an overall body organisation would be a really great start, because who do we go to? Like you said earlier, we can go to the British Horse Society and get feedback from them, Ramblers Association. So I think that is something quite important to think about. Also, I wanted to touch upon something that people have talked about, how land is managed, and it really does vary on the land, the regulations on that land. Certainly on the area that I manage in the Surrey Hills, which for whatever quirk of mountain biking sees a huge number of mountain bikers on that area, is our access issues are very different to a lot of other landowners. We can't physically fence the land. Walkers we're all under Crow, so walkers have the right to be everywhere. So we're not just concerned, in fact, primarily, we're not really concerned about mountain bikers injuring themselves anymore. We've moved on from that. We're more concerned about our other users and the conflict with other users that mountain bikers cause. Speed of mountain bikers, which is why, someone has said about black trails are less dangerous than blue trails. Well, I think one's going faster than the other. Speed is going to be an issue if you've got some family walking up the trail, which they're perfectly entitled to do, because the land is under Crow and we have to abide by those rules. So I think there are a lot of issues to think about in terms of land ownership and the different designations of that individual land. Very different, I know, in Scotland, and as you said earlier, slightly in Wales. But yeah, that was really what I wanted to butt in and just come in with. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will. James?
Yeah, thank you. It just made me think that there seem to be times when we're talking about mountain biking like it's a brand new sport. I mean, when did Daffyd build the Red Bull Trail in the forests? Surely we have got collective bodies, data, understanding, individuals, all of us lot together possess the knowledge to tick all the boxes. We need not just an association, we need a governing body with us guys inputting all that data to solve our problems. We're all here, we all have the knowledge, and I guess what Dave's trying to do is collect it all and solve the problems. But is it happening too slowly for us?
Good question, isn't it? I suppose. I mean, I think just to say on that. I mean, obviously, something that the UK MTB Trail Alliance wants to do is help to answer a lot of these questions. Certainly, the ones that revolve around access to knowledge. Because you're right, the knowledge exists. It's just a question of making it available to people, and that's a relatively simple task, although it obviously is going to take time. And I do think, from talking to the governing bodies, I do think there's an appetite for collaboration between, our organisation and them. And I think, the point that someone made earlier and Dave picked up on about, collaboration with other governing bodies in other sports. I think there's a real potential to do that, especially, if we're working together to campaign for better access for everyone. That certainly will sort of foster those sorts of relationships. Joe and Bern, you've both got your hands up. So go, Joe.
I've put my hand up for Manon because she put a message in and I don't think it got seen, so it's just Manon.
Sorry, I'll sort my Zoom out for next time. Yeah, it's been trying to remember what I wanted to say. I guess back to your question of how we can help landowners focus on riders and mountain bikers, or that's at least how I wrote it down, Robin, when you asked it a little while back, was that I think as Dave Evans mentioned as well, it kind of needs to be, for the public bodies at least, for it to be in their remit more strongly, which does need to come from whoever's setting public bodies' remit, so Forestry England, Natural Resources Wales, Wildlife Scotland, which does mean, I guess it's over a year ago now that Kath and I wrote a letter to the Welsh Government. We actually wrote it to Welsh Cycling and who else we sent it to, Kath? But it ended up getting, mute yourself. Sorry, I was waiting to see if Kath's going to mute, but it ended up getting through via Welsh Cycling, Kath's assembly member, to a minister.
He was, he was a civil servant, wasn't he, in the sport department. So we did go right through the process of, it was actually up here in Conwy, it was our member of the Senedd who really did help. And as Manon was saying, we were almost there actually. They pushed our cause sufficiently for us to actually have meetings with what was his name? Neil Welsh, wasn't it?
And yeah, and basically the outcome was almost did get funding. We had meetings with Welsh Cycling and Natural Resources Wales all together in one room, and there was almost funding. We didn't get all the way, but that was basically a letter signed by a handful of the trail associations that we knew of in Wales at the time. But it did get a conversation going, and I guess my point is that now, Robin, you've got 150 or more. Don't know the number off the top of my head.
125, maybe slightly more than 125. But I'm waiting to see how many people actually answer the survey I've sent out. So we'll see. So we're sticking with 125 for now in case I need to back down to that level.
But yeah, it's a very strong place to advocate at a high level and petition or advocate. I guess the government, which sounds like a big thing, but we did it with the Welsh Government, and we do have plans to do it again, and possibly as a petition this time, and signed by wider organisations as well, which would really, hopefully, and I'm sure it would, help NRW put the resources where it needs to focus on it, because they can only focus on what they're told to and what they have the resources to do it with. So basically, yeah, my whole point is we seem to be now in a really good position to be able to think about doing this, not just in Wales, but also England. And I assume Northern Ireland, which I don't know as much about. But yes, that's, I guess, what this is, bringing an awful lot of people together to start to think about doing that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I do think that's entirely possible. And I think obviously this has been a learning experience for everyone as we've set this organisation up. But I certainly feel that I'm starting to get the access at those sorts of levels that you would want. Actually, that they're quite often happy for an organisation like us to come along and to help them solve some of the problems they've got, because they want more people in the forests, for example. That's a key objective of theirs. So yeah, having those conversations at a DEFRA level in England and the equivalent level in Wales is not impossible. Something I'm quite confident that will happen. Northern Ireland would be more of a problem because they haven't got a functioning government at the moment. But I'll let Bern talk more about that. Go ahead, Bern.
Yeah, I think firstly, Robin, I think you're to be commended and set up the UK MTB trail lines, because it's one of the issues that certainly we in Northern Ireland have had as mountain bikers for a number of years. But the local club that I'd established, Cave Hill, we were whenever we were negotiating Belfast City Council for agreement to build natural trails on Cave Hill, where it's your local park area on the slopes. They wanted us affiliated with a national body, and they were pointing us in the direction of Cycling Ireland. And I know Cycling Ireland are on the governing body of the UK Trails Project, but I'm kind of miffed about the fact that the UK Trails Project, I don't think it has enough representation of mountain bikers on the governing council. I know that the project, David, you're doing a great job. You're over here and doing a lot of research, but I would like to see more capacity building from mountain bikers, you know, at a regional level, organisations at a UK level, which Robin said, and then also I would like to see more input from EMBA Europe. Like, you know, whenever we refuse to affiliate with Cycling Ireland, because essentially they're representing road cyclists. They've been involved in some trail centres in Northern Ireland, and frankly, the trail centres that they have been involved with and that outdoor recreation have been just woeful. The standard of they're just woeful trail centres, and that's why a lot of mountain bikers here, particularly, are gravitating over to natural trails and going in the forest and building the road trails. So I think you know, a greater input from EMBA, and also more recognition of, you know, this group here, the UK MTB Trail Alliance, from at government levels, and also from the funders like SRAM and people that are setting up the UK Trails Project. I would like to see them coming to mountain bikers in future. You know, just my 2 bobs worth.
Cool. Hans from MTB Europe was on the call earlier, but I don't think he's still on. I just checked. So, but I will hand over to Robbie from Welsh Cycling.
Thank you. And firstly, thanks for having me here tonight. It's been really interesting hearing the conversation. I was very much here just to listen and see if there's anything that we could do. And really, just in response to Manon's point before, I spoke with Kath about this, as well as Dave Liddy, Dave Evans, around the real need for a developing mountain bike in Wales project, something to get off the ground. I understand that's a level of the conversation that had happened before. My role is I'm Director of Development and Participation, so I'm in a very fortunate position that I get paid to travel around Wales. I talk to an awful lot of people, and the appetite for it really is there. And I don't think at the minute, because people are talking almost as individuals, just to their MP, going as that collective is probably going to potentially be the door. It doesn't solve all the problems, of course, with that have been talked about tonight, and some of the challenges that Dave's put forward about people building in designated areas. But if we can potentially go for the investment, get the investment set up a project, that's when we can start to really get the wheels turning. So from a government perspective, obviously not within government, but we talk to them a lot. They are so interested. I mean, climate sustainability is just top of the agenda for the Welsh government, and they then of course have the tourism aspect. I think that's what developing mountain biking in Scotland have done so well, is they've got really heavy on that. So rather than going as we're interested in mountain biking, we want to do it for the good of our communities and our sport. Actually going with, we want to treble in the amount that tourists are spending in mountain biking in Wales, and that will prick some ears. So I've got a conversation tomorrow with Visit Wales, where I'm going to put this case in front of them, talk through where we're at with the minute, talk through the opportunities that I think like Commute present to them. They've got 35 million users. It's an easy marketing tool to get it out to people who are interested in this space. And then see where it goes. So if you would like to be involved, I'll drop my email in the chat. But essentially, at the minute, we're looking for a list of stakeholders to go to the government and say, can you come and have a conversation? And then hopefully over time, we'll just grow it so everybody's kind of on one page about what we're doing. I'm not saying I'm the spokesperson for this, but I've just been in that position where everybody seems to be asking for it, but no one's actually pulling it together. So I'm prepared to do that just to hopefully get the investment and see where it lands. Maybe it'll be the same as developing Dimbins, in that it sits under Scotland, it sits under Scottish Cycling, but it's almost its own entity, and it's obviously funded from a different place from what Scottish Cycling is. But fingers crossed, we'll see what we can do. But I think as a collective, we'll get somewhere. Just on the points about British cycling, just for so before Welsh Cycling, I was 9 years at British Cycling, and I think aside from, I'm sure plenty of you know Dan Cook, I think Dan at times was pulling his hair out about the lack of traction internally that he could get, or the lack of care from, say, the communications team about engaging with some of the industry conferences and things. It's a real tough one because they're such a risk-averse organisation, and unless you sit neatly under club insurance or event insurance, there's not a space for a trail association at the minute. They do, and I looked after this for a short while. They have accredited accredited centres, so the providers who will either provide the training, so they might have like leadership training, so Wales Pedal MTB or Forest Dean, you've got YMTB, those kind of organisations, but it doesn't cover the trail building. It did work with Forestry England about a trail, some training specifically for Forestry England, so they've got that training package, but not an accreditation. But perhaps it's something you could suggest. I just think at the minute, they've had a big restructure this year. Funding's changed. They've obviously made some terrible decisions with their funding partners, and you know that it's quite challenging there at the minute. So I wouldn't see it being as a short-term priority, but they are re-strategizing now with a view to having a new strategy by the summer. So now would be the time to start banging on doors, speaking to people. You know, I can certainly put it forward as something that we'd like to see from a Welsh cycling perspective. Yeah, hope that's helpful. I'll drop my email in the chat, but if you'd like to be a part of the Wales-based movement, love to have you on board.
Brilliant, thank you, Robbie.
Can I just say thank you to Robbie for bringing that up, because it's something that I've mentioned to Manon and Kath before about petitioning Welsh Government for some sort of strategy and funding for recreational tourism in Wales, especially in the South Wales valleys. You know, we've got a real cluster of mountain biking areas that offers a huge opportunity for tourism, and as a result, a huge opportunity for regeneration of the area. You know, we've got a very, very deprived area that's fallen down as a result of the loss of industry, and it's a huge opportunity for us.
Brilliant. Okay. So I'm now going to switch to us asking Dave questions about the UK Trails project. I'm sure you've all got lots of questions for him. While you're all thinking of them, I'll ask him one. So Dave, obviously the report will be coming out sometime mid-year this year. The right trails, the right place, the right people, the right time, or some combination thereof. What happens next?
What happens next? Well, once we've got the information gathered from what it is people are riding around the UK, what it is we're doing to manage the trails, and what land managers are seeing as their concerns, constraints, etc. We're going to sit down with Napier University and start looking at some partnership working for where we've got shared goals and objectives that we can pull together most easily. And we'll start sifting through that level of information to see where we can demonstrate pathways that are already viable or have been done through a case study, or areas where a number of concerns have been raised in the same field. For example, the Treble SIs, getting better information out there. What can we do to make doing the right thing easier, and how can we disseminate that? So we'll pull out a number of case studies, we'll pull out a number of sort of easier examples and try and get that out as being a starting point for a toolkit that can be referred to along with the case studies.
Okay, so just to make sure I've understood, so yeah, work you will do centrally, creating resources that will get shared out to people in all 4 nations. Is that fair? Is that a fair summary?
The report is going to go out for all 4 nations. The report is going to cover information from all 4 nations. What the form of the next issue from the project looks like, I don't know yet. I can't say yet. It's once we've sat down and looked through what are these barriers to progress, what are the concerns, constraints, statutory obligations of landowners, and how are the ways through that, we'll then be able to start putting out examples.
Okay, and in absence of anyone's hands, I'll ask a follow-up question then, which is, you know, obviously, you know, as you described to us, when you know, day one of the job, you were expecting to drive out to Inleven, pick up, you know, all the case studies and the documentation, and start driving around the UK helping people out. Can you foresee that happening this year in terms of helping individual cases around the countries, or not?
No, the project has to be far more zoomed out than that, and there's so many ways to achieve a benefit to the sport and a benefit to landowners. It's all about the understanding of what can be done with the right amount of effort, to the right amount, to the correct application. And I think the more we understand the sort of differences in approach that can be used, the better it can be for the industry, sort of the mountain bike community and the land management industry. That would be far better than trying to force this formalized, standardized approach across everything, which, as other people have alluded to, it wouldn't really be appropriate.
No, I think you're right. Again, I'm saying this in absence of anyone's hand, so please put your hand up if you got something better to say than me. I'm sure you do if you're thinking of something. Is, you know, certainly in my understanding of what dim bins have done really well in Scotland, and you know they've really made an absolutely massive difference to mountain biking in Scotland over the last 12-14 years, is by acting as a if you like a neutral party between landowners on one side and mountain bikers on the other, and that's very different to what we're trying to do at the UK MTB Trail Alliance. We're very much trying to represent, you know, mountain bikers riding the trails and the people building the trails, and not act as a neutral party. But you know, having that sort of neutral party to intercede in various different places around Scotland seems to have done, you know, created a lot of progress in those areas where they have interceded. But you're currently saying you don't think you'll have the capacity to do that certainly this year.
Well, certainly not this year. I don't see that being something we can do this year, but I do see and hope that SRAM have already said that they're keen to hear from other investors in this project. They're keen to extend the project lifespan at the end of the 3 years. And as the toolbox develops, as the case studies develop, it would be wonderful if we could, with additional funding from the public sector, from the private sector, particularly from the bike industry, there's a lot of money going around in there somewhere still, that we can, you know, get that information available and take as much on board as we can internally within the sport to help the land management community. So moving forward, there's lots of different ways to explore.
Okay. I still no hands. I can't believe no one's got a question for Dave. Okay, I'm going to ask you another one. I'm not quite sure what it is yet. And I suppose, what's the most surprising thing you've learned so far from your workshops and your travels?
Oh, brilliant question. That mountain bikers could harm soldiers. Yeah. So somebody mentioned that the MOD has had to restrict people from riding around their peripheral land. And the reason with this is, of course, again, budget cuts. MOD used to ship soldiers from the southeast of England over to Wales, up to Scotland to do their training. Now they've had to pull them back in because the money isn't there for training further afield. So the soldiers are doing night operations in that sort of periphery land that's outside the fenced off area, but is sort of treated by the community as common land. So people have ridden across there for about 30 years. I thought the objection was that a mountain biker might get blown up or shot, which is quite high on the health and safety list. But it turns out it's the other way around. If you've got a load of soldiers on night operations, sort of bivvied down, doing escape and evasion, they don't want to be run over. If you've got a platoon patrolling with night vision on, many thousands of lumens coming around the corner can blind a soldier for 5 minutes or more, and he'll need checkups the next week. So, you know, it's again that landowner's duty of care to their employees, the soldiers, by managing the other users of the land. And that was one I genuinely didn't see coming. But again, it's about understanding what the core use of the land is and how we, as sort of guests on that land, can be tolerated if we could sort of understand, you know, we could be here at this time, not at this time, red flags flying, we're doing exercises. So yeah, there's sort of ways forward. The MOD weren't totally anti-mountain biking, but they were saying, you know, you've got to understand why we want you out at certain points in the day, in the week, in the month. So yeah, completely didn't expect that.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. And Tom.
Hi. Thanks a lot for the invite. Basically, I've been thinking in terms of there's a transition to e-bike at the moment. Is that going to have any impact on the project as a whole? And in terms of, is there likely to be any changes to access laws regarding e-bikes?
I can't comment on access laws. All I know is they take decades to change. In terms of the project and land management changes, yes, we're going to see differences in the patterns of riding because of e-bikes. We're seeing a lot of bicycle riding moving towards a sort of ski slope style model where people are going up the steep stuff, down the steep stuff and doing laps rather than taking a more linear approach to riding. And also when you've got a bigger, heavier bike doing more laps of a trail at greater speed, you're going to have more wear and tear going into that. So sustainability is going to, again, become the big question. How do we make the trails sustainable for that greater number of traffic on a bigger machine?
Okay, cool. Kieran?
Yeah, almost leading into two things that were said there, actually. Firstly, on the e-bike front, certainly at our end of the radar, we don't hear any demand for change on e-bike legislation. You know, the legislation is set out fairly clearly what is an e-bike and what isn't. And, you know, a street legal e-bike and mountain bike. So I don't see any pressure there. But actually on the point that leads into that was said about the change in nature of mountain biking to be more wind and haul. And then, you know, I think over the past 20 years, we've all seen a massive shift towards increasing gravity cycling. And I think the question I throw to Dave is, and it's very constructive, how do we prevent mountain biking just being scale extra tracks around the forest? How do and you know, I recognize we're talking about access and all those other things there, but how do we prevent our sport just becoming up and down in tracks around the forest? How do we keep it wild? How do we embrace the entirety of the outdoors on the urban fringe and bridleways in the countryside and all those things, rather than just seeing mountain biking through that lens? And I think the reason I say that is, I think there's always a risk that DEFRA or other major organisations might turn around and say, oh, well, we don't need to do anything for access because, look, you've got all these forests that you can ride around. So we don't need to change access laws. So how do we prevent it being in scale electric tracks? That's my question.
That's a really good one, because the sport is very, very young. You know, we've been here for 30 years, but that's not a lot of time in terms of a sport. And Dovey Valley's been, where I'm based, has been one of the sort of heartlands. So it started with sort of Guys in the Rough Stuff Fellowship on, get this, drop bar bikes that they were riding on unmetalled roads. And then lightweight cross-country race bike came along, and then mass participation. The Dovey Enduro was happened before Enduro had happened, so that was a big XC marathon type event. Then the trail centres came along, and then we went to Gravity Enduro, and we're in the middle of the sort of Gravity Enduro craze. But we've also seen, guess what? Drop bar bikes being ridden on unmade roads again. So the industry's a fickle beast, and it does tend to go in cycles. How do we keep it from being just one thing? I guess that comes back to communication. It comes back to the media, both the print of what's left of it and the non-print, having great big, you know, diverse coverage. And fair dues to Hannah at Single Track, and even to MTB UK. I'm still looking at occasionally 30 years into the sport. But, you know, it shows that there's lots of different things out there. So hopefully it'll like pick people's interest, and people will still keep going on that. How we do that, I don't know, just communication and letting people know what's out there, really. But you're quite right to be concerned. If everyone goes and disappears into a forest for 5 years, we could potentially lose, or have restricted the rights to go to the countryside, and that would be an awful shame. So yeah, something to keep an eye on.
Mark, you had your hand up, but you took it down again.
Well, I think I was going to say I 100% agree with what Kieran was saying there, but he's kind of answered where I was going to come at. You know, if you do keep yourselves hidden away in the forest, it's not going to help access in the wider countryside, which is something personally I'd quite like to try and push. You know, certainly on the Hurtwood and the Surrey Hills, we've seen it change dramatically in the last 10 years, really, where it's gone from being a place that people cycle through and use as a route to go A to B as circular routes, and that's obviously even changed even more in the last few years with electric bikes. People just literally going up and down, up and down, up and down. Personally, I think that's a shame, but that's not for me. But I think that's why I was talking earlier about the disparity in the mountain bike. You talk about mountain bikers, that encompasses so many different types of activity within mountain biking. It almost makes you think that's why gravel biking has now come about, because that was the original mountain biking. Mountain biking now is downhill and jumping, as far as I can tell. But
it's really hard to tell, right? And it really does depend on the circles that you mix in as a mountain biker, what your perspective David. I know Kira and I have very different views on this. We've discussed it at length on multiple occasions, but you know, I think we all can agree there is a spectrum of what mountain biking is. The question is you know, how big is each part of the spectrum? Where does the weight lie? And I think, you know, we haven't really got any good data to go on. You know, we've got the Sport England Active Lives survey, which asks a question about mountain biking full stop. So we know what proportion of UK adults mountain bike every 4 weeks or mountain bike once a year, and those proportions are pretty high. It's about 5% of the English population mountain bikes once a year. But what that means to them, what mountain biking means to them, we don't really know, right? And I think, you know, you can guess at it from the sort of you know, the sales of different types of bikes and their likely uses. But there's plenty of people that have, you know, bought an enduro bike and only ridden it on towpaths. So that's you know, that's only going to give you a certain guide to it. You know, obviously at the UK MTB Trail Alliance, we're primarily concerned with, you know, mountain bikers that ride man-made mountain bike trails. But that doesn't mean it doesn't mean we as individuals or organisationally don't care about the other types of mountain biking. I don't think there's much danger of that. I mean, to put words in Dave's mouth, you know, I get the impression that the workshops he's done in the Lake District and in the Peak District, you know, haven't necessarily been about trails at all. They've been about access to bridleways and access to footpaths. Dave, I should stop putting words in your mouth.
Well, you're right in saying that those things did pop up in the national parks, but we also saw in the national park areas people wanting and campaigning for, and actually going out and building the sort of you know, ski slope model enduro trails and looking for management models for that. And again, in both of those areas, the sort of absence of the blue-red trail, that gateway trail, that or that sort of intermediate plus trail, that seems to be the sort of missing link in a lot of locations. That's certainly something that's come out in national park and sort of extra urban areas. But yeah, the rights of way thing sort of is definitely more rural prominent than urban prominent. But it's certainly something we'll be feeding back to UK Cycling to highlight where we found the most evidence of this.
Okay, cool. So has anyone got any final questions for Dave before we let him escape and go to bed so he can get up early? No. Okay, cool. Zoe, are you still on the call?
Hi. Yes, I am. How are you doing? Good.
I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Robin. So I wanted to just briefly mention the Fostering Inclusive Action Sports project, which I'm involved with along with Kath and lots of other amazing women, that it's predominantly aimed at around mountain biking. But they are working towards having a community toolkit that we can be shared across different organisations and with things like trail associations, with people like that run events, for example, that run coaching, that bike parks, etc. And it's really, at this point, it's about getting other groups that are out there that maybe we don't know about, to fill out a bit of information, a sort of a Google survey thing that just gets more information into the system really about women and mountain biking. So there's a link, but basically the Fostering Inclusion National Sport is about recognising that how women identify in mountain biking is quite different, and that it's massively underrepresented within mountain biking. But yeah, the toolkit is to help women and mountain bike groups to set up women's groups to grow and thrive. So if there's a group out there, Project Activity, Fiona Spotswood, who's running the project alongside sort of Bristol University and her team there, there's a form to fill out. So I can certainly pass that on, as can Kath, if anybody would like to fill out that, or pass it on to anybody that you know that runs things for women in mountain biking. So what's really interesting is it sits actually alongside a lot of what Dave's been talking about around his toolkit and looking at the shape of what is the landscape at the moment around the UK for women in mountain biking. You know, what does it look like? What are the variety of different groups? So you can have a WhatsApp group, you could have a Facebook group, and how do you reach those people? Or to something more formalised, like how they run the Swinley hub rides, for example, about talking about the different grading levels, about talking about waivers and signing a waiver, or is it literally sort of just a group of organisations? But the whole point of the toolkit is to give people some guidance around best practices, how to make people feel welcome, and to share success stories and case studies of what has sort of worked. So as David was saying, not a really restrictive framework or kind of guidance, but sort of these are suggestions and these are things you can do, and this is what you might want to work towards around inclusivity. But it's a really exciting project. There's lots of people on board, and things like British Cycling and Forestry England and various people. So it's sort of in partnership with some of those people, those sort of organisations, and they reached out, and some other myself and Anila and Kath are sort of involved in sharing our views and things. So it's a really great project, and yeah, if you know of any women or anything that's been set up that supports women in mountain biking, then it'd be great to have that included in the toolkit. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I will include a link and a note from Zoe in this month's newsletter. So yeah, if you know any women's mountain bike groups, please point them at that link that I share in the newsletter. That'd be brilliant. So yeah, just before we finish, obviously we've got our own membership survey in progress at the moment. I sent that out about a week ago. I asked people to complete that by Monday next week. So if you haven't done that, please do that in the next week. It turned out longer than we wanted, but there was a whole load of questions in there to try and gather data that will help answer some of the questions we've been talking about tonight. They'll also really help us as an organisation when we launch to the wider mountain biking public, to make that story interesting and also to get some data out there. So please do complete that survey in the next week. That would be really great. And obviously, if you don't, I will be on your case the week after next. Let's everyone say thank you to Dave. Thank you, Dave. That is the sound of everyone clapping on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robin.
Oh,
thank
Dave,
you
you are.
everyone for really, really interesting questions and taking your time out to speak to me this evening. And I'll just say, please do follow the Dinbin's social media channels to see when the survey will be launching and going live. And please get involved with that. Also, please do feel free to drop me an email, drop me a message in the chat, and I'll be really keen to follow up with some conversations for some case studies on different models. So thank you very much for getting together, and thank you very much, Robin, for all the hard work you've done, not just on tonight, but all the other stuff behind the scenes as well. So cheers.
Cool. Thank you. Well, yeah, thank you, and thank you from me, David, as well. Cool. Well, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. Obviously, it was our third call. We had 50 people on the call at one stage, which was amazing. So thank you all very much for coming, and hopefully see you all next month. But at that, I will say goodbye. Thanks very much, guys.